Legal cases, legal issues, legal matters. You're watching WFTV's Law Talk with anchor Christopher Heath and expert legal analyst, attorney Mark NeJame.
All right, let's talk about some of the current cases, issues, and legal matters that our viewers are talking about right now. Joining me today is legal analyst attorney Mark NeJame of the NeJame Law Firm, and Albert Yamfa, who is a partner at NeJame Law. The issue we want to talk about today is one that's really top of mind because right here in Orange County, people are still voting on it, even though it's working its way through the courts, and that is rent control. There's been a lot of movement on this. Where do we stand as we sit here right now?
Well, it's a very hot topic in Orlando, Central Florida, with its booming population. And in a moment, we'll kind of get into some of the legal issues going on. Some of the practical issues going on is we have areas that they don't want to, that the city has not wanted to invade upon, certain neighborhoods that have been here forever, some historic districts. So now we have a workforce who cannot pay the average rent in Orlando now is $2,100 a month, and they can't afford that. So we need more affordable housing. And rents have gone up because with this boom that we had a lot of companies come in, buy properties, raise the rents. But on the other hand, you can only build so much in downtown Orlando. So you've got this tension that exists between wanting to have more affordable housing, but then to keep the neighborhoods intact. So that's kind of a background, and then how do people afford this anymore?
And yeah, that becomes where the county kind of stepped in and said, okay, well, we're going to put some legal protections in there, and that gets us into the courts. Now, it would seem to me as a layperson, you know, what Orange County decides to do in Orange County doesn't affect anyone else. Why is the state getting involved? Why do we have these competing interests? But Albert, there are a lot of interests out there, and it doesn't stop just at Orange County.
That's very true. This does go beyond the borders of our county. There is a law from 1977 in Florida that forbids these types of laws from being enacted unless you meet certain thresholds. You cannot institute rent control or rent stabilization laws absent a showing of an emergency that the wording is very clear. It's so grave as to constitute a menace to the general public. So, on its face, the appellate court saw the ballot measure as, number one, a little bit misleading with the wording, and they had a problem with that. But more importantly, they didn't see that the ballot would succeed, and that, in fact, the Florida Realtors would be very likely to succeed in challenging it because it was not a showing of a menace to the general public. And some of the things they pointed to was, number one, the fact that there's such a high occupancy rate right now. It's not like the apartments and homes are vacant. Number two, the low unemployment rate. And number three, the high sales of homes. You know, homes are just changing hands so quickly. So those are some of the things the appellate court said. In light of all of this, we don't see necessarily that there is such a high standard of an emergency constituting a menace.
And when you read through the decision by the 5th District Court of Appeals, it got to the remedy, and that's kind of where the rubber meets the road, because when this was handed down, people were already voting. Vote-by-mail ballots had already been mailed in. I had already done early voting in Orange County, so I had already weighed in on this issue. My vote was already locked in, but yet now we're being told that this isn't. So we'll find out how voters feel, and this might be kind of a moot point if the ballots get counted and voters reject this, but at the same time, if voters approve it and yet the courts have said you can't do this, it seems like there's going to be some more litigation.
Welcome to Florida elections. And yes, the appellate court the Supreme Court just came down and sent it back to the trial judge, Judge Ashton here in Central Florida. So now it's in his hands again, and we'll see how it unfolds.
And this gets to, I think, another issue, which is within this, you still have the larger issue. And this is something that you point out early on, affordable housing. Whether or not the courts, rule one way or the other on this, whether or not voters go one way or the other on this, we still have a problem in Central Florida, not just Orange County, with people who can't afford to live. And that gets into more of a political question, but at the same time, as we've seen with this, it will intersect with the law, right, Albert?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there was certainly a dissenting opinion to the appellate court. And that dissenting opinion clearly identified a serious problem. I mean, we're talking about a 40% increase on average between 2020 and 2022. The cost of everything has gone up. There are people that we all know who are just struggling and having to make some very serious life choices because of this rent situation. And it's a real thing. What we're talking about here is whether the legal standard was met as interpreted by this particular appellate court.
And this was an effort to help those who needed help. But just because we know that they have a need doesn't necessarily make it legal. And that's where the rubber, as you said, meets the road, and we have to figure out how to give people relief who are going to otherwise be homeless because people can't afford that, particularly low-wage people. And then you compound it with the fact that the law says that you cannot do certain things, and now we've got situations that become somewhat untenable for some. And that's where the city has to, the city and the county, have to readjusting some of their priorities to make more available housing, reasonable housing available to people.
And of course, underlying all of this is the fact that state of Florida loves to raid the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and they have for the last decade, but that is a conversation for another time. Thank you as always, Mark. NeJame, Albert, thank you for coming in today. All right, now if you'd like to see more of this or any of our other law talks, visit our website at wftv.com/legal or join us each week right here on Facebook. I'm Christopher Heath, and thanks for watching.
WFTV's Law Talk was brought courtesy of the Personal Injury and Accident Division of NeJame Law.